I still remember the exact moment everything changed. It was 2:47 p.m. on a Thursday when David Wellington III looked me dead in the eye and said the words that would ultimately cost his family everything they'd built over 3 generations. "Rebecca, you're just a worthless secretary. Stop pretending you understand real business and go make coffee." The conference room fell silent. 12 executives, people I'd worked alongside for 4 years, suddenly found their laptops fascinating. The presentation I'd spent 3 weeks perfecting, a comprehensive client retention strategy that could save the company millions, lay scattered across the mahogany table where he'd swept it with his arm. Before I tell you exactly how his arrogance became my stepping stone to the sweetest professional success of my life, could you take a second to hit that like button and subscribe? Because what I'm about to share will show you how one moment of corporate cruelty can backfire in ways that seem impossible until they happen in front of a $50 million acquisition deal. And trust me, you need to hear every detail of how one man's entitlement destroyed everything his family had built over 30 years. Let me back up. 4 years earlier, I'd started at Wellington & Associates as an executive assistant, fresh out of business school with an MBA I'd earned while working 2 jobs. The position was supposed to be temporary, a foot in the door at one of Chicago's most prestigious consulting firms, but temporary became permanent when I proved I could handle complex client relationships better than most of their junior consultants. Charles Wellington Sr., the founder, was old school but fair. He valued results over pedigree, which is how someone like me, daughter of a mechanic and a nurse from the South Side, ended up managing accounts worth millions. For 3 years, everything was perfect. My client satisfaction scores were the highest in the company. I'd increased revenue for every account I touched. I was being groomed for a promotion to senior consultant. Then Charles Sr. had his heart attack. David Wellington III, his 35-year-old son who'd never worked anywhere else, inherited control of the company overnight. And with it came his Harvard MBA arrogance and his deep resentment that a secretary was outperforming his golden boyfriends who'd been handed positions they'd never earned. The writing was on the wall from day one of his leadership. In our first all-hands meeting, he made it clear that proper corporate hierarchy would be restored. Translation: people like me needed to remember our place. For 8 months, I watched him systematically dismantle everything his father had built. Client relationships deteriorated as he replaced experienced account managers with his fraternity brothers. Revenue dropped 23% in 6 months. But the worst part? He blamed everyone except himself. That Thursday afternoon, I'd requested the meeting to present a solution. Our biggest client, Morrison Industries, was threatening to leave. They represented 18% of our annual revenue. I'd identified exactly why they were unhappy and created a detailed strategy to not only retain them, but expand their contract. Morrison Industries is frustrated because they feel like we don't understand their evolving needs, I began, clicking to my first slide. Over the past 18 months, their industry has shifted towards sustainable manufacturing, but our recommendations haven't adapted to— Stop. David's voice cut through the room like a blade. Who authorized you to contact Morrison directly? I didn't contact them directly. I analyzed their feedback from the quarterly reviews and cross-referenced it with industry trends to— You analyzed? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Rebecca, you're a secretary. You schedule meetings and answer phones. You don't analyze anything. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. David, I have an MBA in business strategy, and I've been managing client relationships successfully for— I don't care what degree you bought from some community college. His words hit like physical blows. You're here to support real business people, not play consultant. The room was suffocating. 12 people who knew my track record, who'd seen my results, sat there like statues. Some studied their hands. Others suddenly needed to check their phones. Not one person spoke up. The Morrison account needs someone with actual business acumen, David continued, standing up and walking around the table toward me. Someone who understands the complexity of corporate relationships, not someone whose biggest qualification is knowing how to work the coffee machine. That's when he swept my presentation materials off the table. You want to help with Morrison? Great. Make sure the coffee is fresh for my meeting with them tomorrow. And Rebecca? He leaned down, close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne mixed with the scotch he'd had at lunch. Next time you want to play businesswoman, remember that there's a reason you're sitting at the kids' table. The silence that followed felt like drowning. I gathered my papers with as much dignity as I could manage, my hands shaking slightly. As I reached for the last scattered page, my phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. Rebecca Williams? This is James Chen from Meridian Capital Partners. We need to discuss a confidential opportunity. Can you call me today? I looked up to see David already moving on to the real agenda, completely dismissing what had just happened. The other executives were nodding along, pretending they hadn't just witnessed professional assassination. That night, I sat in my small apartment, staring at that text message. James Chen, Meridian Capital Partners. I knew the name. They were one of the most aggressive private equity firms on the East Coast, known for strategic acquisitions and hostile takeovers. I called the number. Rebecca, thank you for calling me back. James's voice was warm but businesslike. I'll be direct. We've been watching Wellington and Associates for some time. The company has incredible potential, but there are leadership concerns that are affecting performance. My heart stopped. I'm not sure I understand what this has to do with me. We understand you've been instrumental in maintaining client relationships despite recent management changes. We also understand you might be underutilized in your current role. Underutilized, that was one way to put it. What exactly are you proposing? We're considering an acquisition offer for Wellington and Associates. If successful, we'd need someone who understands the business intimately to help with the transition. Someone who knows the clients, the processes, the real value drivers of the company. The pieces started falling into place. You want me to be an inside consultant. We want you to be a partner. Full equity stake, seat on the board, complete operational authority over client relationships. But Rebecca, this conversation never happened unless you're interested. I looked around my tiny apartment, at the business school diploma hanging crooked on the wall, at the stack of client success reports I'd compiled over 4 years. Reports that apparently meant nothing because I was just a secretary. I'm interested. The next morning, I arrived at the office early. David's meeting with Morrison Industries was scheduled for 10 a.m. I'd prepared the conference room perfectly. Fresh coffee, pristine presentation materials, everything arranged exactly as he liked it. At 9:45, I knocked on his office door. Morrison Industries just called, I said, keeping my voice steady. They want to reschedule. David looked up from his computer, annoyed. Reschedule? I've been preparing for this meeting all week. It was the first lie. He'd done no preparation. I'd seen his calendar. He'd spent yesterday afternoon at the country club. They said something urgent came up. They'll call to reschedule next week. He waved me away dismissively. Fine. Clear my calendar for the rest of the morning then. As soon as his door closed, I called Morrison Industries directly. Something I'd never done before. Something that went against every corporate protocol I'd been taught to follow. Mr. Morrison, this is Rebecca Williams from Wellington and Associates. I know this is unusual, but I need to speak with you about your account status. There was a pause. Rebecca, right? You're the one who's been handling our quarterly reviews? Yes, sir. And I'm calling because I think you deserve to know that Wellington and Associates is about to undergo significant changes. Changes that could affect your contract. Another pause. Longer this time. What kind of changes? The kind that might make this a good time to explore your options. I'm not supposed to tell you this, but there's been interest from other firms in acquiring our client portfolio, specifically your account. It was true, though not in the way I was implying. Meridian wanted the whole company, not just individual clients. But Morrison didn't need to know those details. I appreciate your honesty, Rebecca. Charles always spoke highly of you. Said you were the smartest person in that building. My throat tightened. Charles Sr. had said that about me, before his son decided I was worthless. Mr. Morrison, if you're open to it, I'd like to schedule a meeting with you directly, off the record, to discuss what Morrison Industries really needs going forward. I'm listening. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Can you meet me at the Fairmont? The lobby lounge? I'll be there. After hanging up, I sat back in my chair and realized what I'd just done. I'd crossed a line, gone behind my boss's back, violated corporate protocol, committed what David would probably call insubordination. It felt amazing. That evening, I met with James Chen and his team at a discreet restaurant downtown. The conversation was more detailed this time, more specific. Wellington and Associates has $47 million in annual revenue, James explained, sliding a folder across the table. But it's operating at only 60% efficiency due to management issues. With proper leadership, we estimate we could increase that to $75 million within 2 years. I opened the folder. Financial projections, client analysis, organizational charts. Everything was there, including detailed assessments of employee performance. My name appeared multiple times, always with positive annotations. How long have you been planning this? 6 months. Ever since David Wellington took over and the company's performance metrics started declining. And you want me because you know this business better than anyone except maybe Charles Sr., because your clients trust you, and because you've been systematically shut out of opportunities you've clearly earned. James leaned forward. Rebecca, we're not just offering you a job, we're offering you the chance to run the company. Full operational control, 15% equity stake, base salary of $350,000 plus performance bonuses. I'd been making $65,000 as an executive assistant. What do you need from me? Complete discretion. Continue your normal duties. Keep documenting client relationships and operational inefficiencies. And when we make our offer, be prepared to immediately step into a leadership role. When will you make the offer? Soon. Very soon. The next afternoon, I sat across from Mr. Morrison in the Fairmont's lobby lounge. He looked tired, frustrated, exactly how I expected someone would look after dealing with David's incompetence for 8 months. I'll be honest with you, Rebecca, he said after ordering coffee. We've been considering ending our relationship with Wellington and Associates. The service quality has deteriorated significantly since Charles's health issues. I know, and I'm sorry you've had to deal with that. The thing is, we don't want to leave. We've worked with Wellington for 12 years. Charles understood our business, but his son, Morrison shook his head, David talks at us, not with us. He doesn't listen to our concerns, doesn't understand our industry, and frankly doesn't seem to care about results. This was my moment. Mr. Morrison, what if I told you there might be a way to continue the relationship with Wellington and Associates, but with completely different management? He raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. I can't give you details yet, but there may be significant changes coming to the company, changes that would put client service and results back at the center of everything we do. You're talking about new ownership. It wasn't a question. I'm talking about new priorities, new leadership, a return to the values that made Wellington and Associates successful in the first place. Morrison studied me carefully. Rebecca, in all honesty, you've been the only person at that company who's understood our needs. If you were in charge of our account, really in charge, we'd have no reason to look elsewhere. What if I told you that might be possible sooner than you think? He smiled for the first time since sitting down. Then I'd say Morrison Industries might be very interested in expanding our relationship with Wellington and Associates. Expanding. Not just staying, expanding. That night, I called James with an update. Morrison was on board with new management. They were even willing to increase their contract if client service improved. Perfect, James said. We're accelerating our timeline. Can you be ready to move by Monday? Monday was 4 days away. What exactly happens on Monday? We make our acquisition offer. David Wellington will have 48 hours to respond. Either he accepts, or we go hostile. And if he accepts, then Tuesday morning, you walk into that office as the new director of client relations, with full authority to restructure operations as needed. I looked around my apartment again. At my small desk where I'd been working nights and weekends on client projects that David would never let me present. At the stack of rejection emails from companies that thought I wasn't qualified for roles I'd been doing informally for years. I'm ready. Monday morning arrived gray and cold. I dressed carefully, my best business suit, the one I'd bought for interviews I never got. I arrived at the office at 7:30 a.m., an hour before anyone else. At exactly 9 a.m., David's phone rang. I could hear his voice through the thin walls of his office, initially confident, then confused, then angry. By 9:15, he was shouting. At 9:30, his door flew open. "Rebecca, get Charles Wellington Jr. on the phone, now." David's uncle, the only other family member with any ownership stake in the company. "I'm afraid Mr. Wellington Jr. is in Europe until Thursday," I said calmly, not looking up from my computer. "Then get me our corporate attorney, right now." "Which firm would you like me to call?" "What do you mean, which firm?" "Stevenson and Associates. They've been our attorneys for 15 years. I just wanted to confirm, since Stevenson and Associates sent a message this morning that they'll be representing Meridian Capital Partners in this matter. Conflict of interest, they said." David's face went white. "What the hell are you talking about?" That's when my phone rang. I looked at the caller ID. James Chen. "Excuse me," I said to David, picking up the phone. "Hello, this is Rebecca Williams." "Rebecca, it's James. Is now a good time to discuss the transition details?" I looked directly at David, whose face was cycling through confusion, rage, and something that might have been fear. "Yes," I said clearly into the phone. "Now is perfect." "Rebecca." James's voice was professional, but I could hear the satisfaction underneath. "Meridian Capital Partners has just submitted a formal acquisition offer for Wellington and Associates. $52 million. All cash." David lunged for my phone, but I calmly moved it away from his reach. "And Mr. Wellington's response timeline?" 48 hours. After that, we proceed with our alternative strategy. Alternative strategy. Corporate speak for hostile takeover. Understood. Should I prepare the client transition documents? Actually, that won't be necessary. We've already secured commitments from 87% of the current client base. They've agreed to maintain their contracts under new management. David's face went from pale to gray. "Hang up that phone right now, Rebecca. You're fired." I looked at him with the same expression I might give a child throwing a tantrum. "James, one moment, please." I covered the phone's mouthpiece. "David, you can't fire me. Watch me. Security." Security reported to Meridian's transition team this morning. They're ensuring business continuity during the acquisition process. I uncovered the phone. "James, I'll be in touch shortly to discuss next steps." After hanging up, I stood and gathered my personal items from my desk. The few photos, the small plant I'd kept alive for 3 years, my coffee mug from business school. "What the hell is happening here?" David's voice cracked slightly. "What's happening, David, is exactly what happens when someone confuses inherited position with earned respect. You did this. You orchestrated this entire thing. I documented everything. Your missed meetings, your failed client presentations, the 23% revenue decline, the 3 major clients who left because of your incompetence. I didn't orchestrate anything. I just stopped pretending your failures were acceptable." That's when Charles Wellington Jr. walked through the front door. David's uncle was a tall, silver-haired man who'd been traveling through European offices for the past month, completely unaware of the corporate earthquake happening at home. "David, I got your frantic messages. What's this about a hostile takeover?" He stopped when he saw me packing my desk. "Rebecca, what are you doing?" "She's the one behind this, Uncle Charles. She's been working with some private equity firm to steal our company." Charles Jr. looked between us, his face growing more serious by the second. "Rebecca, is this true?" "Mr. Wellington, I've been offered a position with Meridian Capital Partners as Director of Client Relations. They've made an acquisition offer for Wellington and Associates. And you knew about this offer?" "I was approached because of my client relationships and operational knowledge, yes." Charles Jr. was quiet for a long moment. "David, my office. Now." He looked at me. "Rebecca, please don't leave the building just yet." 20 minutes later, I could hear shouting from the executive office. Words like incompetent, family legacy, and complete disaster carried through the walls. My phone buzzed. A text from Morrison Industries. "Rebecca, heard about potential changes at Wellington. Whatever happens, Morrison wants to work with you directly. Are you available for lunch Thursday to discuss expanding our contract?" Then another message, this one from Chen and Associates, Wellington's second largest client. Rebecca, we need to talk. Urgent. And another from Blackstone Manufacturing. Is it true you're taking over client relations? We've been hoping for better service. By noon, I had meeting requests from 7 clients, 3 potential new accounts, and 2 headhunters who'd somehow already heard about Meridian's offer. The corporate world moves fast when there's blood in the water. At 1 p.m., Charles Jr. found me in the break room. Rebecca, I need to understand something. Did David really sweep your Morrison presentation off the conference table? I nodded. And called you worthless? Among other things. He sat down heavily in one of the plastic chairs. My father built this company on the principle that results matter more than pedigree, that competence trumps connections. Yes, sir. That's the company I fell in love with. David has been struggling with leadership, but I didn't realize it had gotten this bad. I could have been diplomatic, could have softened the blow. Instead, I pulled out my phone and showed him the documentation I'd been keeping. Screenshots of emails, records of missed meetings, client complaints that David had ignored. Jesus Christ, he whispered, scrolling through months of evidence. Rebecca, why didn't you come to me with this? With respect, Mr. Wellington, you've been traveling for most of David's tenure, and David made it very clear that questioning his decisions was not acceptable. Charles Jr. handed my phone back and rubbed his temples. What exactly is Meridian offering you? Director of Client Relations. Full operational authority. Equity stake. Base salary of $350,000. His eyebrows shot up. We've been paying you $65,000. Yes, sir. For managing accounts worth millions. Yes, sir. While David was making $180,000 to... What exactly was David doing? That was the question, wasn't it? At 3 p.m., the entire staff was called into the main conference room. David stood at the head of the table, looking like he'd aged 5 years in one morning. Charles Jr. sat beside him, stone-faced. Everyone, David began, his voice hoarse. Wellington and Associates has received an acquisition offer from Meridian Capital Partners. We have until Wednesday to respond. Murmurs around the room, worried glances. However, I want to make something clear. This company has been in my family for 30 years. We are not selling. More murmurs, these ones skeptical. Charles Jr. stood up. Actually, David, we need to discuss all our options carefully. This is a significant offer. Uncle Charles, you can't be serious. This is Dad's legacy. Your father's legacy was built on excellence, David, not stubbornness. That evening, I met with James and his team at their downtown offices. The space was all glass and steel, modern and intimidating. Everything Wellington and Associates wasn't. How did the announcement go? James asked. About as well as expected. David's in denial. Charles Jr. is asking the right questions. And the clients? I pulled out my phone and showed him the messages. Morrison wants to expand their contract. Chen and Associates wants to meet urgently. I think we're looking at potential revenue increases across the board. James smiled. Rebecca, I need to ask you something and I want you to be completely honest. Of course. Is this about revenge or is this about business? I'd been asking myself the same question for weeks. It started as self-respect. I said finally. David didn't just insult me. He dismissed everything I'd accomplished. Every late night, every successful project, every client relationship I'd built. He reduced 4 years of professional growth to worthless secretary. And now? Now it's about proving that competence matters more than connections, that results matter more than last names, that the best person for the job should get the job, regardless of where they went to school or who their father is. So both. Revenge and business. The best revenge is success, right? Tuesday morning, I arrived at Wellington and Associates to find David in my former workspace, going through my files. Looking for something specific? He spun around, startled. These are company files. I have every right to review them. Of course. Though I should mention that everything sensitive was transferred to Meridian's secure servers yesterday evening. His face darkened. You can't just steal confidential information. I didn't steal anything. I documented my own work product and client interactions, which, according to my employment contract, I'm entitled to do. Employment contract? Rebecca, you were a secretary. I was an executive assistant with client management responsibilities. There's a difference, though. I don't expect you to understand it. That's when I noticed what he was really looking for. The Morrison files were scattered across my desk, along with financial reports I'd never seen before. David, what are those financial documents? Nothing that concerns you. But I could see enough to recognize what they were. Expense reports, credit card statements, all with David's name on them. Are those company credit cards? Rebecca, you need to leave. Now. But I'd already seen too much. Charges to high-end restaurants when David was supposedly in client meetings, hotel bills for weekend trips, country club fees, thousands of dollars in personal expenses charged to company accounts. David, have you been using company funds for personal expenses? That's none of your business. Actually, it is, because when Meridian completes their due diligence, they're going to find these records. The color drained from his face. That afternoon, I called James with an update. How bad is it? He asked, after I explained what I'd seen. Bad enough that it might constitute fraud. We're talking about thousands of dollars over several months. Rebecca, I need you to be very careful here. Document everything you can legally document, but don't do anything that could compromise the acquisition. Understood. And Rebecca, this information changes the nature of our offer. If there are legal issues with current management, Meridian will need to address that immediately. Wednesday arrived with no response from Wellington and Associates. The 48-hour deadline passed at 9 a.m. At 9:15, James called David directly. Mr. Wellington, this is James Chen from Meridian Capital Partners. We haven't received a response to our acquisition offer. I could hear David's voice through the phone from across the room. We're declining your offer. Wellington and Associates is not for sale. I understand. In that case, we'll be proceeding with our alternative approach. You should expect to hear from our attorneys within the hour. What alternative approach? We are initiating a hostile takeover, Mr. Wellington. We've secured financing for a $60 million bid and voting agreements from 67% of your current client base. They've agreed to terminate their contracts with Wellington and Associates and sign exclusively with Meridian Wellington, our new subsidiary. The silence on David's end was deafening. Additionally, we've received concerning information about potential financial irregularities that we'll be reporting to the appropriate authorities. David's phone clattered to the floor. By Thursday morning, everything had changed. David was gone. Not just from the office, completely gone. Uncle Charles found a resignation letter on his desk and David's company car in the parking lot with the keys on the seat. The FBI's Financial Crimes Division had opened an investigation into the expense account irregularities. And I was sitting in my new office, David's former office, with Rebecca Williams, Director of Client Relations, Meridian Wellington Associates, on a nameplate that had been delivered that morning. Charles Jr. knocked on my door at 10 a.m. Rebecca, I owe you an apology. Mr. Wellington, you don't need to. Yes, I do. I should have been paying attention. I should have seen what David was doing to this company. And to you. He sat down across from my new desk. I want you to know that my father would be proud of how you handled this situation. Thank you. I also want you to know that I'm staying on as a consultant with Meridian Wellington. I'd like to help rebuild what David damaged. I'd welcome that. He stood to leave, then turned back. Rebecca, can I ask you something? Of course. Did you plan this entire thing from the beginning? I considered the question carefully. Mr. Wellington, I plan to be treated with respect. I plan to be judged on my results, not my background. I plan to work for a company that valued competence over connections. And when that didn't happen, I planned to find a company that would. 3 months later, Morrison Industries signed the largest contract in company history, $15 million over 2 years. Chen and Associates increased their retainer by 40%. We'd hired 12 new employees, including 3 junior consultants from top business schools who reported directly to me. The company revenue was up 31% from David's final quarter. And I was walking into my corner office every morning, looking out at Lake Michigan, reminding myself that competence had won. But the story doesn't end there. 6 months after the acquisition, I was interviewing candidates for a new senior consultant position when my assistant buzzed in. Ms. Williams, There's someone here to see you. He says it's personal. David Wellington III walked into my office looking like a different person. Thinner, older, wearing an off-the-rack suit instead of his usual custom-tailored clothes. "Hello, Rebecca." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "David? I wanted to apologize." I waited. "You were right about everything. The company, the clients, the way I was running things." He looked out my window at the lake. I was so focused on proving I belonged in my father's chair that I forgot what it actually took to earn it. "What are you doing now?" "Working for a small consulting firm in Milwaukee, junior associate, making $55,000 a year. Less than I'd made as his worthless secretary." "David, why are you here?" "Because I wanted to ask if you'd consider giving me a reference for a senior analyst position at Morrison Industries." The irony was breathtaking. David Wellington III, asking the woman he'd called worthless to recommend him for a job at the company I'd saved with the presentation he'd swept off the table. "David, you embezzled from your own family's company. The charges were dropped. I paid restitution plus penalties. That doesn't erase what you did." "No, it doesn't." He leaned forward. "Rebecca, I know I have no right to ask this. I know I treated you terribly, but I'm trying to rebuild my career based on merit, not connections. Just like you did." I studied his face. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that looked like genuine humility. "Tell me something, David. What did you learn? That leadership isn't about having the biggest office or the loudest voice. It's about making the people around you better at their jobs. It's about listening to good ideas regardless of where they come from. And it's about earning respect instead of demanding it." I picked up my phone and called Morrison Industries. "Mr. Morrison? It's Rebecca Williams. I have someone I'd like you to meet." As David left my office that afternoon, I realized something had shifted. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't even about proving a point. It was about building the kind of company I'd always wanted to work for. A place where results mattered more than pedigree, where good ideas could come from anyone, where respect was earned, not inherited. 3 weeks later, David started at Morrison Industries as a senior analyst, reporting to their operations director. He was good at the job. Not great, but good. And for the first time in his professional life, he was succeeding because of his work, not his name. A year after the acquisition, Charles Wellington Sr. made his first visit to the office since his heart attack. He moved slowly but steadily, touring the expanded space, meeting the new employees, reviewing the financial reports that showed record revenue and client satisfaction scores. He found me in my office just before lunch. "Rebecca, Mr. Wellington, it's wonderful to see you." He sat down carefully in the chair across from my desk. "I wanted to thank you for saving my life's work." "Sir, I think you're giving me too much credit." "Am I?" He smiled. "Let me tell you something, Rebecca. 6 months before my heart attack, I called James Chen at Meridian Capital Partners. My breath caught. I told him that if anything ever happened to me, if David ever ran this company into the ground, there was one person who understood the business well enough to save it. "You recommended me?" I told him that the smartest person in this building was sitting at the reception desk, managing million-dollar client relationships while being paid like a clerk. He leaned forward. I knew David would fail. I'd been hoping he'd prove me wrong, but I knew he'd fail. And I knew you were the only person who could pick up the pieces. I felt tears threatening at the corners of my eyes. "The only thing I didn't predict," Charles Sr. continued, "was how spectacularly David would implode, or how brilliantly you'd rebuild everything. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for proving that the values this company was built on still matter." As Charles Sr. left my office, I looked around at everything we'd built. The team of talented consultants who'd been hired based on merit, the client relationships built on trust and results, the culture where ideas were valued regardless of their source. David had been wrong about many things, but he'd been wrong about one thing above all. I was never just a secretary. I was never just anything. I was exactly who I'd always been. Someone who believed that competence should triumph over connections, that results should matter more than relationships, and that respect should always be earned, never simply expected. The sweetest part wasn't the revenge. It wasn't even the success. The sweetest part was proving that in a world that often rewards the wrong things, merit can still win. And sometimes, just sometimes, the person they underestimate the most is exactly the person they should have been listening to all along.